started, ready to go. Everybody's still present. Mr. Michaels?
Your Honor, before we get started, I have an exhibit list for the court. I gave a copy to Mr. Martin already.
Okay, please.
They're for today's witnesses and exhibits.
Okay. Thank you.
The first exhibit that we're going to use are those photographs that are listed at the very top, and those have been stipulated to by the state.
Okay. And Matthew Reeves is going to be your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Just call Matthew Reeves.
All right. Thank you. Have those exhibits been pre-marked?
No, Your Honor, we'll have to mark them with the
Okay.
card. We do have our own exhibit sticker marks. If the court wishes, we can either use those or use the yellow ones.
Typically, you've got one for identification, and then the clerk will mark them with the final. Once they're admitted, they'll be marked with the clerk sticker for final entry, correct, Madam Clerk? Okay.
Your Honor, just so the court knows, so that we can prepare for that, you'll see that our exhibits are in a clear little envelope that's tied to it. So the
Okay.
back side we've left open if we want to attach anything to it, a sticker or whatever is convenient for the clerk. Okay?
Okay, thanks. So you can just use your exhibit
We're gonna use
when
our
it's
exhibits
for
and then-
identification,
Exactly.
and then once it's admitted, it'll have a final number.
And Judge, do you want me to go ahead and pre-mark mine for Mr. Reeves now, or do you want to wait till, we're going to take a break at lunch and then you cross or something?
Correct.
Okay, then I'll
And,
deal with it first.
They'll need to be marked somehow for identification, and then they'll come in with a number once they're admitted.
Yep, I've
Okay,
done this
I know.
before.
All right, go ahead, we got young Mr. Reeves.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
This way, sir. Watch yourself. See the witness chair and speak in the front. Don't you think
Go ahead, Mr. Michaels.
Please state your name.
Matthew J. Reeves.
And is Curtis Reeves your father?
Yes, sir.
How are you employed, please?
With the Tampa Police Department.
And how long have you been with the Tampa Police Department?
14 years next month.
Tell us about your career there.
Mr. Michaels, I apologize for interrupting you. Even at the deposition, I had trouble hearing Mr. Reeves. He is very soft-spoken, and I couldn't hear very well what he said.
Okay.
Because,
Maybe you could step it, yeah, there you go. A little closer will help.
thank you, I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe, Judge, if I can just, kind of do this or something, if I can't hear, I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, that'll
All
be
right.
fine.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Tell us about your career at the Tampa Police Department.
Like I said, I have almost 14 years on the department. I started back in 2003, and I worked in patrol for at least 4 to 5 years before going plainclothes for approximately 4 years. At which time I joined the was selected to join the Tampa Police Department bomb squad. And at that point, I went back into patrol as my daily duties, and I've been on the bomb squad for 6 years, certified as a hazardous devices technician for about 5 years.
Okay, so you're a member of the bomb squad now?
Yes, sir.
Prior to that, do you have any military experience?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I served in the U.S. Air Force for 6 years. I started back in 1995 and got out in 2001.
And did you have any sort of security clearances?
While I served in the Air Force, I served as a radio operator on the National Airborne Operations Command Post. And to perform my duties, I was required to carry a top secret STI clearance.
Let's talk about the sort of things you would do with your father growing up. What sort of things would you do?
From a very young age, my father was always very involved with everything that I did. I was in soccer, Boy Scouts. We did a lot of church youth activities. And a lot of family get-togethers with, like through church, we did canoe trips where it was the fathers and sons, and we'd go camping on the river, whether it be the Swanee River or the Alapaha. We did that at least once a year, numerous camping trips every year with canoes, bicycling. We went to North Carolina in the mountains and camped at least once to twice a year, and camping, like I said, hiking, backpacking. When I was around town and so forth, I was always involved with soccer, and at some point, for a few years, my dad was my coach, and then if he wasn't the coach of our soccer team, he was an assistant coach. He made the time to actually come out and be involved. So he was always involved, which I found, now that I work in law enforcement,
I'm not going to object. He's now becoming non-responsive and that and providing gratuitous information.
Just getting a little non-responsive. I'll sustain us to that.
So was your father a father who was just too busy at work to be involved in your activities as a child?
Actually, the complete opposite of that. I'm amazed now that I work in law enforcement at the amount of time that he did make to spend time with me when I was growing up.
Now, you mentioned bicycling with your dad?
Yes.
Over the years, and we'll go ahead and set a cutoff date of January 2014. Over the years, tell us about any changes you've seen in your dad's ability to bike with you. First, tell us what sort of bicycling you would do with him.
Growing up, a lot of mountain biking, and eventually, when he felt I was capable of keeping up, I would do long-distance bike rides on road rides with him and other people that he worked with the police department. Eventually, into my early high school years, which would have been in the early 90s, I started getting where I could actually outpace him, and occasionally on long rides where I say like 75-mile rides, I would leave him and go off with some of the faster people. As time went by, different things that we did together while I was in the military, I'd return home, we'd go mountain biking. That would have been in the late 90s. In that time frame, he stopped mountain biking completely, and we didn't do really any more riding due to the fact that he couldn't keep up when we did ride.
Okay. And after the rides, before he stopped riding, did you make any observations concerning his physical condition after he rode? In other words, was he stiff? Was he tired? Was he sore? Those sort of things. What did you observe?
As the years went on, yes, it definitely magnified the issues that he's had over the years that have come from a lot of the time that he spent on the police department and on the SWAT team. A lot of the injuries he sustained back then. And just,
I'm going to object. We have a proper foundation of any type of personal knowledge. It's pure speculation at this point. And even if he was told by his dad what happened, it would be hearsay.
Less restricted to what he has personal knowledge of, please, and remember to include some time frame.
As your father got older, was he able to do the same things he did with you when he was younger?
no, sir.
And describe that.
Everything from the mountain biking. When growing up, he got me into hunting and involved with hunting and things. This time early on when we would hunt, he would be the one who would climb the tree and set the tree stands, and I would watch to learn. And as time went by, I took over that role. He couldn't do it any longer.
And what time period are we talking about?
This is going back into the 90s, leading on into the early 2000s. We would buy equipment that was specific to help him in what he needed to do, something that was more comfortable, something that was easier to use for climbing a tree. So we bought very specific equipment for that purpose.
Now, before we talk a little bit about the hunting, did your father change from a mountain bike, which is riding in the mountains, to a road, which is riding like on pavement?
Yes, sir.
And did he have any difficulties that you observed in riding that road bike?
The road bike was less impactful, and he did that in place of running because of the impact that it had on him.
Do you know if whether or not he required any extra padding on the handlebars?
Yes, we did. He would use extra padding. More than one case, I went and bought additional padding, which we wrapped his handlebars because his hands.
What about gloves, extra padded gloves?
Yes, I would, like for Christmas or something, I would buy him extra padded gloves.
All right, let's talk about hunting. Was that something you did as a boy growing up?
Yes,
Your
sir.
dad?
I started, before I could even hunt, I was allowed to go and observe him while he hunted, and as he taught me how to.
What sort of hunting did you do?
Primarily, he was involved with archery hunting, so he would be hunting either deer or hogs. I would be allowed to go along. I would sit close by, early on in the stand with him, then later I would sit in a stand nearby without a weapon and just observe. As I grew up, he taught me what I needed to do, and when he felt that I was competent enough to make a humane kill on an animal, I began hunting myself.
Tell the court what things you observed prior to 2014 regarding your dad's ability to hunt.
Definitely a drop off in his physical mobility, his ability to sit still in the stand as long as we did when we were younger. We might sit half a day, whereas we'd cut it back to maybe 2, 3 hours maximum. And a lot of times he will have gotten up and walked around some and then sit back down if we did stay in longer. He couldn't move or drag a deer out on his own. One of the last ones that he did take himself, which would have been in the early 2000s up in Georgia, he attempted to move it himself and hurt his back, and me and a friend of mine actually had to load it.
And before that, was he able to get a deer out of the woods
Yes.
by himself?
When we had started early on, he had no problem at all doing that.
And what about shooting the bow itself? Tell us about what you observed in terms of his deterioration.
Growing up, we always shot compound bows, but we shot what's called fingers, where you put your fingers directly on the string. Well, that's you're holding all the weight with your fingertips. We did that for many years when a lot of people were already starting to change over to what's called a mechanical release, where you're holding it back with your wrist. He switched over to a mechanical release because he used to have to tape his fingers because they would hurt him so bad. As time went by, in around 2009, 2010, we had planned to go hunting in Ohio, and he couldn't use his older bow, so he bought a new bow with a lower weight poundage pull. And when I set it up originally, it was set up for roughly 50 pounds pull weight. And before our trip, the last trip that we took in the beginning of 2013, right before this incident, he actually had contacted me and asked me to research getting a crossbow because he said he couldn't pull that bow back.
Now, before this last trip, and this is right before January of 2014, is that correct?
Yes.
That hunting trip took place where?
In North Florida, in the Panhandle area.
Now, was there any kind of practice with the bow prior to going?
There was, and that is where he had contacted me stating he couldn't pull it back and was asking me to research crossbows.
Did you observe him not being able to shoot?
I did not.
Okay. Were you with him when he practiced?
Yes.
And how many arrows did you use to practice with?
Normally speaking, we might shoot a couple dozen arrows. When he was practicing, he couldn't shoot more than a few, 3, 4 arrows, and then he would stop.
Now, in this last hunting trip, which was right before January of 2014, did your father use a tree stand?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And tell us about that. How does that work?
It's a small 2-piece stand, weighs approximately 18 to 19 pounds. We had bought them years earlier because they were extremely lightweight, and the way that they climb is extremely easy. He hadn't used it prior to that trip. I think the last time it had been used was roughly 2010, so he hadn't had any practice in it. We did take it with us, and he did use it on one occasion on that trip.
Now, in 2010, how high up in the tree did he go?
Going back to our earlier years, back in the 90s and stuff, we might be 20 to 30 feet up a tree, generally speaking.
What about this last trip?
The last trip, he was only about 10. The tree, he was only about 10 feet off the ground. The tree wouldn't even allow for him to go any higher, and he wouldn't have.
Now, what about you said he hunted from a blind?
Yes.
And did he put that up himself?
No. I assisted with carrying it in and assembling it.
Is that something he used to do on his own?
No, actually, it was bought specifically for him to hunt on the ground because it was easier for him. We actually had also purchased a swivel-type reclining chair that was easier to sit in, much more comfortable than what we had used in past years.
And how did it make you feel to see all this change in your dad?
No, I'm going to object. It's not relevant how you feel.
No, that is his name.
Was hunting important to your father and you?
It was very important to both of us.
Why?
It's where we spent time together. Being that I had been gone in the military, even when I would come home, that was one of the things we would do together. After I got out, we joined a hunting club together, and it was time spent between us. It was mine and his time, and occasionally some of his friends would be involved that I grew up with and grew up hunting with, and it was just the guy's time that was very important to us.
What other kind of deterioration did you notice in your father prior to January of 2014?
He's always been big with woodworking, and he also did a lot of leather working, from making holsters to knife sheaths to making just custom leather items. If somebody wanted something, he always enjoyed making those kind of things and doing things, building things with his hands, and that dropped off tremendously while in the late 90s and early 2000s when I got out. At one point I'd even requested him to build me a holster for a firearm. He didn't want to do it because he stated it when he did make things.
Calls for hearsay.
To the extent that it doesn't, I'll allow him to answer.
So did your father make you that holster?
No, and his reasonings behind it, he hasn't done any leather work, whereas when he made things with leather with his hands, he said it is
Your Honor,
cramped
I
and
cannot,
hurt.
the reasoning behind the speculation even. I
All
don't
right,
understand.
I don't think those call for hearsay, so.
Did you notice anything else in terms of deterioration in your father? Did you see him wearing a back brace around the house, for instance?
He wore a back brace. He used liniment oil or some sort of hand salve on his hands regularly in the mornings.
And that was prior to 2014 in January?
Yes.
Anything else you observed?
He had what he called a trigger finger, and I had observed before that finger was locked up and he wouldn't be able to bend it.
You've observed that, is that right?
I have observed that, yes.
And you don't live at home, is that fair to say?
No, sir.
Where do you live?
I live in Dade City.
And how often do you see your father?
Anywhere from, it can be 2 times a week to once every 2 weeks.
And prior to 2014, how often would you see him?
At least in that range.
Okay, let's talk about January 13th of 2014, okay?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what plans you have for that particular day.
My plans initially were involved with cleaning my vehicle due to the fact that it was covered in clay and mud. So I was cleaning and doing things outside because I'd been away for a week or so. He
Did you get a
contacted,
text at some point?
he either called me or texted me.
And was that an invitation of some sort
Yes, it was an invitation to attend Lone Survivor movie.
at the Cobb Theater?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you go with your parents to the Cobb Theater?
No, sir.
Okay. What happened once you got there?
I was running late to the theater. I purchased my ticket and responded straight inside. I didn't stop to get anything. I went straight into the theater because I thought the movie might have started. When I walked inside, it was already dark inside and the previews were playing.
Okay, let me show you what's been marked as composite Comments. Exhibit 1. I'll move your time by stipulation to enter Exhibit 1 addendum.
Okay, it'll be a minute.
As Exhibit 1.
Okay. That's exhibit.
I assume that's I apologize for sitting down, I assume that's the photograph.
It is, I gave Mr. Moore the list.
Okay. And this is a composite?
It is, and what we'll do, Judge, we'll identify if there's a JPEG number, that way we can keep it straight on the record.
Okay.
All right. Now, you go into the theater, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's where you buy your tickets?
At the front opening,
And where do you go from there?
straight into the theater where the movie was playing.
Now, when you get to the theater, do you remember the number of the theater?
I don't recall.
Okay, does Theater 10 sound?
It sounds familiar. Yes.
Now, once you get to Theater 10, you walk in. Can you, and I'm showing you what's been marked as a composite, and it's a JPEG 2060417. You're looking at the screen. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you say you entered the theater, do you see the area you entered the theater on that picture?
Yes, it's the open door in the lower left corner.
Okay. And that's with is that with the green exit sign or some sort of sign over the top we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And when you walk into the theater, what are the conditions of the theater?
It's already dark.
And when you say dark, are we talking about like that, where some of the house lights are on? Are we talking about pitch black or somewhere in between?
It's nearly pitch black.
Excuse me, Judge, may we approach?
Do we need that?
Yeah, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it was appropriate.
All right. Can you just swing your chair over maybe?